To follow along, I think it might be helpful for you to first imagine for a moment three creeks running parallel, flowing in the same direction. This semester has been, like me, wandering down the pathway of each of those creeks, intermittently, as is my habit, trying to find confluence. So, if you don't mind, I want to take you briefly down those trails to show you what I mean, what I found, and where I need to keep exploring. So, the first creek. As a little girl, I begged my mother to take me to the teacher's supply store where the shelves were lined with curricula in all subjects, all grade levels, and all I wanted to do on Saturday mornings was play teacher with my sister, which she hated. The point is, I got my wish. I became a teacher. I am surrounded by teachers, and I choose that term really purposefully. I teach, and I don't want to be out of the classroom. I think that's why this notion of praxis matters so much to me in the scholarship. I've been really steeped in practice and pedagogy throughout my career, but I've chosen this program at ODU to start to seek out the theory that anchors that practice. So now what I want to know is where that space is, where the two things meet, practice and theory, so that I can help guide the other teachers that I work with to the same exploration for themselves, especially those who do not and will not enter doctoral programs or have the privilege of spending time to sift through that theory. So what do I need to enter into this territory thoughtfully? Well, I already know that the field of rhetoric and composition values praxis. I know that from scores of pedagogical studies that are published within this field, but I don't yet see that serving instructors as well as it could. For example, I often hear recommendations for what I'd consider pretty untenable pedagogies, those that suit the privilege of tenure, those who have the time and the energy that isn't already spent in 4 to 5 classes per semester, and designed for those who have the space to fail, to be quite honest. So what I want to ask is how we can support instructors more formally, making their professional lives easier, not by asking them to attend more hours of PD, or to consider disconnected theory, but instead to look for those moments of praxis. How can I better support instructors to do so? I think I need to closely examine feminist epistemologies and those methodologies of care, as Dr. Romberger stated. Maybe even theories of interrogating boundaries, which I read in Kristen Moore's work recently on the public engagement in a technical communication pedagogical approach. But ultimately, how do we make the voiceless more visible in our research? So the second, my husband was a first-generation high school graduate and college student, and I really try to see higher education through his eyes whenever I can, trying to discern the appeal and the return on investment of students just like him today. So I really respond to that pragmatic application of course design, that which applies in recognizable ways to the mission of civic literacy, personal empowerment, marketable skills. Inherent here is the cultivation of this sense of self and sense of agency that McDonald talked about, mixed with tools for a pragmatic working society, that which is marketable. And while these two are positioned as adversaries quite often, that's the marketable versus kind of the democratic, I see them as parallel possibilities. So how do we realize those possibilities? We all want good things for our students, right? So nothing is terribly new that I'm saying right now, but the question of how we get there and how that journey is complicated or advanced by core composition classrooms is a much more complicated series of conversations that I'd love to enter into. So again, what do I need to enter this territory thoughtfully? Well, I think I need a greater understanding of the experience of at-risk students beyond my own family. I need insight into how students perform and or are constrained by academia, and specifically the role of English courses in that performance. And again, I think some of these feminist frameworks of study could help those methodologies of ethnography, because they're such close examinations of the experience of particular students. I think those sorts of methodologies would really help. I also need to challenge myself with work like The Violence of Literacy, Stuckey's book that I just recently started reading, and recognizing the places where literacy is used to constrain and condemn certain students. This last one has to do with fear. I am no technological pioneer. I couldn't even imagine why anyone would have wanted an email account, and I only conceded to get one when my first teaching job insisted I have one for contact. And while I already adored rhetoric for its philosophy, its pragmatism, its heuristic for reading anything in this world, and I found, as Garrison notes, an epistemological position that views knowledge as contingent and is constructed by social discourse communities, I knew that a large portion of those communities were in networked spaces. Still, I shied from this concept of digital rhetoric. I knew there was a real gap in my pedagogy, so I sought out the challenge of DMAC, digital media and composition at The Ohio State University, so that I could work with Cindy Self and Scott DeWitt and Margaret Price. I was terribly nervous at first, and I was sure I'd be identified in that first hour as a hopeless Luddite. But of course, I know now nothing about Cindy Self is marked by exclusion. Here's the point: I got the chance to face my fear and find a way to embrace that change, and I inherited an interest in the scholarship on multiliteracies and specifically multimodality. As Cindy Self makes clear in her essay, The Movement of Air, multimodality isn't just something we add on to composition for a little new aesthetic to please our students or make education fun. It's not even about fun. It's about honoring the reality of multiple modes of making meaning and to hand that panoply of possibilities to our students' bank of composing processes. It's about being engaged participants in society. I see that as both being marketable and empowered. And it's about increasing access, especially to those who have been systematically denied via false constructions of what constitutes literacy. So, narrowing in, I want to pursue research that explores online learning spaces, in particular, just because I think those have gone pretty unexplored, from that lens of access and inclusion, rhetorical situatedness, and multiliteracies. What do I need to enter, again, thoughtfully into this territory? I need a lot more experience with instructional design theories, particularly online learning theories, things like constructivism and connectivism. I need to keep looking more closely at multiliteracies and accessibility. Those two terms are not at all synonymous, but there are some really powerful intersections and misconceptions. And continue to chip away at my fear of technology as a catalyst for change. I've been reading some Feinberg's Philosophies of Technology as a bit of a start recently. I need to keep reading about digital rhetorics and the work of the New London Group and Cheryl Ball and her work with Kairos and Anne Wysocki. So finally, where's the confluence? When I seek the places where these three creeks meet, I see common denominators in the attempt to make accessible that which is otherwise sought to exclude. For students, I see possibilities for access in widening the purview of the types of writing that suit particular rhetorical situations more honestly. I see the inclusive models of access to education to at-risk students, shy students like I once was, remote students, active duty students, those who are working for a better life, those who want to change the world, but giving all of them the tools, the available modes of meaning making. I see multiliteracies and specifically multimodality at the heart of the pedagogical considerations that I would like to explore. I see for teachers possibilities in finding the intersection of practice and theory that hands really rich scholarship or hands access to that rich scholarship that other instructors are not otherwise compensated to learn. Dr. Kristen Moore said in this guest appearance in my Technical and Professional Writing Pedagogies course with Dr. Richards that she tells her students up front what we all already know is true. We live in a system that is deeply unequal. To that I'd add, in some ways, academia serves to perpetuate that inequity, and in other ways it serves to challenge inequity and close those gaps in access. But we have such a long way to go, and I hope ultimately in my own scholarship I'd like to think I can enter into the conversation from a position of closing those inequities. I can keep doing that by finding the ways that you empower voices of at-risk students, voiceless instructors through critical awareness, and access to the functional, rhetorical, and critical tools of literacy, and the wherewithal to both consume and compose all the modes of text that shape our experience in this world. I think that's where I best fit into this rich body of scholarship that's come before me in rhetoric and composition.